I wonder if you've ever tried your hand at plumbing. I was once decorating our bedroom and I tried to refit a radiator that had been taken off to allow us to decorate. I tried for a long time to get it seated right on the pipes and to get a good seal connected up again. But as hard as I tried, I couldn't stop the radiator from leaking. In the end, I had to admit defeat, admit that I couldn't actually do it myself, and call the plumber out. It was fairly humbling to see the plumber assess what I'd done with a concerned look on his face, take it all off, and start again. We like being able to sort problems out ourselves, don't we? We like to be self-sufficient people. Depending on someone else doesn't come naturally to us. What's more, our world loves high achievers. We love people who can do it for themselves. And this is one reason why Christianity is so offensive to so many people. Offensive because it teaches us that in terms of our relationship with God, we really are helpless. We could try all sorts of things to fix it. Good works, going to church services, being kind. But God tells us in the Bible, none of it can deal with the greatest problem that we have. The stark reality is that Christianity has no hope for us unless we're prepared to humbly admit the situation we're in and how we need God to help us. But what exactly is it that we have to admit to Him? What do we need to acknowledge to God before He can help us? Well, the first thing we need to admit is that we're guilty. We've each rebelled against God and damaged and spoiled His good world. But secondly, we also need to admit that we're helpless. Helpless to fix the problem that we've made. You see, it's not as if living without God, doing things our own way and spoiling God's world is something that we just did yesterday and now we've stopped. No, if we're honest, every day we continue in our sad rebellion against God. And as much as we might try, we keep living in this flawed way. We can't stop it because it flows right from the centre of our being. We're captive to the darkness of our hearts. But hope comes with a man called Jesus. Everything in the Bible up to this point has been preparing for and pointing us to Him. As we've seen already, Jesus gives us this glimpse of the world that we all want. He's able to heal the sick and raise the dead and feed the hungry. He can control the elements. Yet despite all these encouraging signs, the Bible then tells us about something that seems to snuff out the hope that Jesus brings. He dies. This life that brings hope ends in death. Is this the end of our dreams for the world we all want? Well, the clear and wonderful answer that we find in the Bible is no. No, because the death of Jesus is not the end. His death was unique, and what happened afterwards was astounding. You see, there are two important things we need to understand about Jesus' death. The first is that Jesus died in our place. The death of Jesus was a real death, but it wasn't an ordinary death. He didn't die because he was a criminal or because he'd done something that meant he deserved to die. Instead, Jesus died because he chose to. He died because he was following God's plan for our rescue. He died for us. You see, Jesus was our substitute. He didn't deserve to face death and be punished by God, but he took our punishment. and curse for us. As we've seen in our journey so far through the Bible, we're the ones who actually deserve to be there hanging on the cross. But amazingly, Jesus graciously steps in to take our place. I wonder if you've ever read the story of Captain Corelli's mandolin. Corelli is an Italian soldier posted to Kefalonia during the Second World War. And towards the end of the story, Captain Corelli and his friend Carlo and his fellow soldiers are facing execution by the Nazis because they defected to the Allied forces. And there's this one scene where they're all standing there in front of the firing squad with Captain Corelli and Carlo standing next to each other. And then just as the firing is about to start, something amazing happens that changes the course of Corelli's life for good. This is how the story is told. Amid the chaos of the shooting, what no one had seen was that at the order to fire, Carlo had stepped smartly sideways like a soldier forming ranks. Antonio Corelli, in a haze of nostalgia and forgetfulness, had found in front of him the titanic bulk of Carlo, had found his wrists gripped painfully in those mighty fists, had found himself unable to move. Carlo stood unbroken as one bullet after another burrowed like knives into the muscle of his chest. Eventually, Carlo flung himself backwards, and Corelli lay beneath him, paralysed by his weight, drenched utterly in his blood, stupefied by an act of love so incomprehensible and overwhelming, so filled with divine madness. Carlo stepped in for Corelli, and that's just what Jesus does for us. It's like he grips our wrists firmly and he stands in front of us. Our sin rightly deserves God's judgment. Our refusal to live as he says, doing as we want, damaging and destroying his good world, harming each other, it all rightly brings God's anger and punishment against us. But Jesus steps in. He came to suffer for us by taking the full force of God's anger at our sin instead of us. And in this way, Jesus deals with the problem of God's judgment against us for good. It was all part of God's wonderful rescue plan. He sent his own Son, God himself, to die to save us. So you see, God is both the one who punishes sin and also pays the price for it. The one who carries out his fierce anger at our rebellion, but who steps in to save us from it. It's an incredible substitution on God's behalf. And I wonder if you recognise what situation that all leaves us in now. Those who are rescued like this by Jesus can be free to enjoy God's new world, living at peace again with God in the world we all want. But how can we be sure? Well, because God gives us proof through the Bible of what Jesus' death in our place achieves. First of all, there's a torn curtain in the temple, the place people would go to meet with God. And as Jesus dies, God tears this huge curtain in two from top to bottom. It's a picture of a door opening to us so that we can again be with God and be welcomed into his presence and company. But secondly, there's also resurrection. The resurrection of Jesus shows us the second big thing we need to understand, that Jesus has already started the world we all want. Right back at the start of Genesis, we saw that God warned the first man and woman that if they didn't trust him, if they refused to obey him, they would die. And so it was. By eating that fruit from the tree that God had forbidden, they died. They became less than they were meant to be. Death and decay set in, and it spoiled God's good world. What's more, Adam and Eve died spiritually too. Instead of enjoying a good and unhindered relationship with God, enjoying being with him and living with him, they were now separated from him, alienated from him, with no hope of return. And ever since then, sin always leads to this same dreadful consequence. The Bible tells us that the wages of sin is death. That's why Jesus had to die. Die to face all the horror of death our sin brought about. But wonderfully, the death of Jesus isn't the end of the story. His death wasn't the end, but the start of something new and glorious. That's where the resurrection comes in. New life followed the grave of Jesus. And because of that, God promises that all who are rescued by Jesus can also look forward to the same. Look forward to new life with God again. The resurrection is a promise and the beginning of the world that we all want. So please let me invite you to consider the resurrection of Jesus carefully. Consider the resurrection of Jesus for yourselves. Weigh up the evidence. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, there is no good news to the Christian faith. And Christians are sad, deluded people who are living a lie. But consider this. If Jesus did rise from the dead, then it changes everything. It really is the ultimate game changer. It means that the remarkable claims of Jesus are true. He is everything he said he was. He did everything he said he would do. It means his promise of a new world has come to pass. It means we can't ignore Jesus. He demands a response from us. His resurrection makes all the difference in the world. You see, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, I personally couldn't believe in him. None of us truly could. Who would trust a man who claimed he was God but simply died and faded away? But if this man said he would die and then rise again, if he said it and did it, well, we can really be sure that he is about who he is, can't we? We can be confident of putting our trust in him. It's because of the resurrection that I believe in Jesus today. But I don't want you to just take my word for it. Look into what the Bible tells us about the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Look at all the different evidence that's given to show that it really did happen. How various theories about Jesus not really dying or his dead body being stolen from the tomb are all dealt decisive blows by the eyewitness testimony that's recorded in the Bible for us. We'd be glad to help you consider those things if you'd like that. But if Jesus did rise from the dead, what kind of response does he want from us? If his promise of a new world can be trusted, how can we be a part of that new world? Those are the vital questions that we're going to be considering in our next session. So I do hope you can join us for that.